Hi, everybody. It's Joy Brooks and Lucy with Email and Coffee, and then some. Today, I'm speaking and talking about marketing attribution. And I've got Natalie Jackson here. Natalie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm excited to be here. And I love Lucy. She's so cute. I am the director of demand generation at CBiz and the co-host, I suppose you could say, co-voice on the podcast Humans of Email with Jen Capstraw. And I'm excited to be here.
Great. One of the reasons why I want to talk about attribution is because so many companies, so many email marketing campaigns are run in a silo.
That's true.
And, just email marketing itself has no idea as to efficacy beyond, click, call to action. Like, you won't see the money attributed to that. So you don't really know, how much am I impacting the bottom line? Am I doing well? They'll say, the email metrics will provide you with some information. But how much information is that? Not everybody gets the conversion data, right? So you don't see the sales. You don't know anything of how much money they're pouring into email marketing to even know, is one sale enough? Is 50 sales necessary? Well, where do we break even here? What's the story? It's a different attribution model. And that's what we're talking about here. What is the marketing attribution model? How do you set that up in business?
This is one of my favorite topics. And there's even further complications for email marketers, which is in every other channel, I should say in every other digital channel, there's usually a way to quantify dollars spent and then tie it verifiably to dollars returned. But it's funny because I feel I've had so many conversations around email where you're well, what is it exactly that you're trying to quantify as spend in email? Is it cost of your ESP? And if so, in what time frame are you referencing that cost? Is it cost of hours spent on creating email and thus salary load? What is the actual spend on an email program?
It's very difficult. And there's a lot involved in that. Because, you've got your designers, you've got your content editors, you've got your perhaps you've got an analyst running around behind the scenes, maybe a list manager, maybe you're doing some sort of API, and now you've got a programmer involved. There's a lot of dollars in email marketing.
Right. And which do you count and which do you not count? I mean, it's not as cut and dry as I spent, however many thousands of dollars on this Google ad and it returned, X number of dollars. You just can't really do that as easily with email. There's a lot of variables, which is funny. And I think also why you tend to see, anyone tossed into email at a lot of companies where they're well, anyone can do email because it's not viewed as a spend source, right? And so well, why not toss anyone in it? Because what is the value of email? I don't know, I feel that tends to be the resounding narrative. Obviously,
you can at least, if you're allowed to, if you're given that data, you can see the return and thereby that metric. It's not just click where you're someone clicked, woohoo. You can actually see the conversion when it happens. Are they clicking it because it's a big red button and it looks good? It looks easy. Are they clicking it and they're actually buying? Are they clicking it, buying a lot? What is happening here?
Well, and so, when you and I initially talked, my whole career has been B2B. And sometimes, I look across at B2C and I'm those lucky marketers. Right? Click buy. Whoa, that's pretty straightforward. Click, add to cart, buy it, off you go, right? No one has ever clicked and bought professional services. You can't I'd like to add accounting to my cart, please. It's not a thing.
say it, $50,000, $500,000, whatever it is that they're selling business to business.
Yeah.
The services are wild. People just don't, buy trains. Oh, I'll buy a train.
Add to cart.
That way,
I mean, it would be great. Like selfishly as a B2B marketer, like if I could find a way to like have all the services that CBiz offered, like added into like an e-com shop, like that would be fantastic. But that's not a thing, right? And like part of that is because, especially in B2B, oftentimes the sell is the relationship. And like all you're trying to do as the marketer is like drive awareness to the brand, start to establish the relationship, nurture the relationship, and then ensure continuity of the relationship. But like everything you're doing in B2B is like in service to the relationship that like one human is building with like another human.
And sales really needs to buy in. Sales really needs to buy in.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, that's like 100%. I mean, I like demand generation for me. A lot of times people are like, okay, like, what does that mean? What do you mean when you say demand generation? And I'm like, well, my team is the team that sits like literally at the intersection of marketing, IT, and sales. Like those are the teams that we spend the most amount of time with. And like to your point, because it's so critical in B2B that like marketing, especially on the digital side, is like aligned to the messaging and desires and targeting of the sales team. And like everybody's on the same page and like working in unison. It's great. I love it. I personally love it. Same with IT. Like we also can't do our jobs without like being good at IT or understanding IT or understanding SQL databases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's do this marketing campaign. Well, who are we going to send it to? I don't know. Ask IT. That can't happen.
No. But you do get the question, like, well, I really want to incorporate this like very specific data point from my CRM system. At which point the email marketer or the demand generation team is like, yes, but we must talk about how that data lives in said field and whether or not it's even possible to pull it into our marketing automation platform.
Is it 500 people? Is it 5,000 people? What is,
Is it a pick list? Is it a write-in? Is it a lookup? Like, what is it? Yeah, I can't even look at that data point, right? Don't even get me started on structured versus unstructured data. That's like a whole story.
I'm not saying it's not needed in direct to consumer or B2C. I'm not saying it's not needed. It's just so different. And it becomes critical in B2B. Critical. As opposed to, oh, you know what? Anybody who signed up for shoes at DSW, they want shoes. So, let's just figure it out. They want shoes, obviously. So let's do sneakers. We'll figure it out. And it's not as critical as it is B2B when you've got lots of different services at a bunch of different price points.
Yeah.
A life cycle that, brings them from here to here, and pitching this to them here is like, speaking Chinese to, a 3-year-old who doesn't even speak any language.
Yeah.
It's that attribution model. I mean, it literally comes out, it becomes a business model. That marketing attribution model. It's not that the marketing KPIs don't make any sense. It's not that you don't use them. It's that you're back at the business model and you've got to align the business model with your marketing efforts so that you can turn it around and say, we claim this. This is ours. We did this. And sales can say, no. The sales says, no, it was a collaboration. They did it. Yes. Yay team.
It's so true. And I think what I think is really interesting about the last few years of being in B2B, especially in digital and email, is how we're starting to like move away from like the one-to-one attribution model that we used to have to rely on. And we had to rely on it because like that's what technology gave us, right? I mean, there was this idea that like you download a white paper and I hand you off to a sales development resource who then turns you into an appointment and then hands you off to a producer or a salesperson and they turn you into an opportunity and then you become a client. And it's very clear that like what we're trying to say as a marketing unit is like, it was the white paper. But like that also assumes that every sale goes in that linear fashion. And like that does happen. And when it does, like great for us because it's very clear what happened. But like the truth of it is if you dig into any CRM system as a marketer and you start to like peel back the layers of campaigns that account or a person was in, like even doing it on a contact level is like one thing. But then if you start looking at multiple contacts within a singular account and all of the different campaign touches that they had either before they downloaded that white paper or after they downloaded that white paper, it becomes quickly apparent that like you couldn't necessarily say the white paper is the one thing that caused them to become an opportunity. And like the kicker is that that's just the data you can see. Like you don't even, it doesn't show up in your CRM that like they did 6 months worth of Googling you or like asking their.
They ran into the store and they saw somebody and somebody said,
right. Or my favorite one, they knew the seller, they knew the person who like closed the sale because they had both done business together at a company like 6 years ago or something like, you know what I mean? Like, well, I used to have a boss, not at CBiz, at a prior company. And like, I would be like, oh, we drove this great lead in through whatever marketing campaign. And he would be like, oh, I knew that guy like 20 years ago. And I would be like, stop, you can't do that. I mean, you know,
but they do. And that's the sales rep that you want that has all these relationships. That's what companies, you know, buy sale or, you know, they employ salespeople like that because of their satellite. That's what sales is. That's part of sales. It's not, you know, what I know, it's who I know.
Exactly. You're right. You're 100% buying relationships. But like, then of course, then that like takes us back to, well, in a B2B organization, it's marketing's job to try to position the relationship and not the product. And like, that's, I mean, that's kind of a separate conversation. I think that's where a lot of B2B marketing falls flat is they try to position the product and not the relationship. And it's like, well, that's different. Like that's a B2C play. Like the B2B play has to be the relationship, not the product.
That's right.
So, yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts, obviously, on like B2B email and relationships. But I mean, ultimately, going back to like that attribution path, I think that like recently, probably in like the last like 5 years, like technology has caught up to like what we as marketers know is going on, which is that like lots of other things are happening both before and after you download that white paper. And it doesn't really make sense to give full attribution to just the white paper or to just the email. So like a really great example I like to like share with our team at CBiz is like, when you look at our data, we're driving in net new opportunities and net new leads from like lots of different sources, tons of different sources. And like, great, good for us. We should be doing that. Right. And like, we're a really cool business because we've got so many different things going on and like so many different types of audiences and services and interests all happening at once. And there's like, you know, cross collaboration on a lot of them. And so there's a ton of opportunity if you're a data geek like me to get into the data and like, just go like, you know, just go wild on it. It's great. It's like a great place for a data-driven marketer because there's so much data to like analyze and toy with and figure out what you want to do with. But you know, like, I think that like, as we start to see like the catch-up cycle of like being able to say, okay, maybe these different sources drove in these leads, but you know, the number one channel of like last conversion is email. Because even though these people are coming in from all these other channels, like oftentimes where they actually decide to raise their hand and say, yes, I'd like to buy something is email, right? Like it's that like final touch point. It's that like last builder of the relationship bridge. Like, oh, okay, like I know the one person and I'm building a good relationship with a human, but at the same time, like I see that the brand is credible because they put forth all this thought leadership. And I see that like they're responsive to the market and they're responsive to my needs and they understand the pressures that I'm faced in my specific role in my specific industry. And like, that's where email really shines, I think, is like, while you're building a relationship with a human, you're also building a relationship with the brand in a more subtle way, right? It's not quite so aggressive as that relationship with a human.
Right. The, The problem always comes in business to business is where those leads come from. For some reason, they just think that email marketing in itself generates leads.
It's not a lead gen channel. That's so that is my hill I will die on. Email is not a lead gen channel.
They'll say, I'll get this often. The businessman that finds out that, at the networking meeting or whatever, they find out that I do email and they're like, oh, great. I let's do this together. And I'm like, where's your list coming from?
Yes.
And they're like, they look at me and they're like, aren't you going to do that? I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I don't sell lists. And they certainly just don't grow. There's no list seed that you put in the.
It's $1 million idea, Joy. Could we do that?
I mean, once you have the list, you can start, and you don't need a huge list.
Yeah.
You need a strategy to build. You need some sort of machine that's running lead gen. It's not email marketing that's doing that. And that's a problem for a lot of businesses, a lot.
Yeah. And that is, you are so true. I mean, it is sort of like a chicken and egg thing for email marketers, right? Like if your sole role is email, then I think there's a lot of pressure there to grow lists. But like, I think then as an email marketer, you're like, well, that's not really my wheelhouse. Like my wheelhouse is like, engaging and right. Yeah. I mean, I think
I'm not birthing the list. I'm nurturing the list.
Right. And like I feel very grateful. Like my role is demand gen. So I get to look at both sides of that. And I get to like ask, like, how are we continuing to grow? Where are we incorporating email? And like it's good for me because like I kind of came out of email into like demand gen. So like I understand the pressure and I see where that's coming from. And so I think as email marketers, like you really do have to sort of get engaged with the demand gen team and ask yourself like, well, what are they doing? Are they incorporating signups on the website so that like when we get organic traffic to our thought leadership via SEO tactics, that like it's easy to see where I can subscribe for more content like this? Is like that a thing? Or when we're creating anchor pieces of content, like, are we making it easy for people to subscribe continuously? And I think, yeah, you're right. Like, but I will say, like one thing I would love to hear less of is pressure on list size. Cause you're right. Like engagement I would rather personally have engagement on a small list than I would massive quantities of people who don't do anything personally.
The problem always comes up. Well, how do we get them to engage?
Yeah.
If they didn't opt in, and the odds are with business to business, they didn't necessarily opt in.
Yeah.
The relation was a handshake. And that's okay in America. That's okay. It's a handshake. It's opt out in America. So two businesses sit down, they have a meeting. The next thing they're on a list, right? The sales is talking to the business, and now there's a client relationship, and now they're getting nurtured. Okay. So why aren't they engaged? Because they really weren't interested to start out with. They agreed to a lunch. For all intents and purposes, they bought somebody else's services the day after. You don't know. And they're not unsubscribing because they don't know in the long run who's going to ask them for something. And now they've got, the business, the client has a past relationship. They can just, hey, you know what? I do need this now. And now it's up. So it's, as I said, the difference between if you're doing B2C and you're doing B2B, the differences are so wild and crazy.
Yes.
Somebody comes out of doing commerce and finds themselves in the business world will freak out.
It's very different.
Because everything that they're going to tell everyone to do doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Joy. This is like my resounding frustration with like email conference content is that you go to like conferences that are like best practice for email. And if you're a B2B marketer, you are 100% sitting there and you're like, no. no.
The concept of cold email in B2B, cold is not a dirty word. It's how you manage it. that's the filth underneath.
Yeah.
But email is not. You could everybody in the CRM that has, let's say they have Salesforce Marketing Cloud, they're doing cold email. They're not doing it through the Marketing Cloud. They're doing it through Salesforce. But it's email.
Yeah.
You're going to hand off that contact at some point to marketing so they can get marketing to them. But the relationship is being nurtured on the sales end. That's called email.
Well, and like one of the things I always say, like, so you go to these conferences and like one of the things that I feel like you could put on your bingo card is everybody must be explicitly opted into all of your emails. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't, like, I look at that as a B2B marketer and I'm like, who has ever opted into a sales nurture? Who has ever been like, yes, please, I would like to be sold to. Could you please sell to me? That doesn't mean there isn't a place for it and that it's not effective. But I mean, like, can you imagine if you try to take nurturing out of the B2B funnel? Like it's because it's not like buying a sweater, right? Like I can't put a 10% offer in front of you and like know that if I say like, Joy, if you subscribe, like give us your email address and we'll give you 10% off your first order of accounting services. Like that doesn't, like, that's not a thing.
You're selling plastics or resins, right?
Yeah.
Sign up form at the bottom, sign up for my newsletter.
Exactly.
Signing up for plastics? What What newsletter are you going to send me? I don't understand. What
right.
it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. So I'm not opting in. However, you've got a great white paper that discusses, resins in boating. And that's that's why you're at the website to buy resins for boating. Hey, now you're going for the white paper. That's not an opt-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a gateway.
It's so true. And like, can you imagine like, and I think about that a lot. I think about a lot our more European, like it wouldn't be, I don't think it's out of the question for something like that to happen, like GDPR to happen in the US. Like, I don't think it's out of the question. And like, I do think that as B2B marketers, like, especially with like CPRA this year, like that is something that kind of shifted the landscape for B2B a little bit. Cause it used to be like, CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, like it's really more about B2C. Like as long as you're marketing to businesses and your individual is a business person, like they're a representative of the business. And like, so, the guardrails were a little bit looser, but like now the new tightening of those laws is like, no, it's very clear that like that impacts B2B companies as well. Now you're right. Like it's still an opt-out landscape in the US, which is great. Thank goodness. But like, I don't think that like we're safe. I think, right. Eventually we'll get into a situation where I think there will be something similar to GDPR in the US, in which case B2B marketers are going to have to say, okay, but like, how do I get somebody to opt into a sales nurture? If that's the case, and my barrier for entry has to be explicit opt-in, then, now's the time for email marketers to make friends with content, because thought leadership is how you're going to get people to opt in. And they're not going to opt into your sales nurture unless it's thought leadership oriented and adding true value to the recipient. But like that's something that like B2B marketing has often lived in service to sales, and sales has often thought the best way to go about things was to push what they wanted into, an inbox, because it's free, right? It's free. And so like, that's a place where like, historically you've been able to just like shove messaging and say, well, I want you to have this thing, so I'm going to tell you why you should have it. And I think we'll have to reframe our strategies into more thought leadership, and be more responsive to the needs of the recipient if we want to have them opt in, should we get into a landscape where like GDPR, we're sort of in that opt in instead of opt out scenario.
Yeah, because while the other channels, social channel, the influencers, again, they don't truly translate into business to business. I'm not saying something along the lines of a video wouldn't do it. A video would do it, right? But you get somebody on Instagram talking about, again, plastics. That doesn't convert anybody.
And like, who do you send like plastics to, right? Like, it's not like a sun hat. You can't like send it to somebody with a good following and be like, here's a picture of my plastics, And like, honestly, Joy, like I have, for better or for worse, I mean, I love it. Like, I've never been in a B2B industry that has anything photographic. Like, what am I going to take a picture of like, like, what is that?
It's some vague service out there that you're buying. Again, it's even wilder. A video works, so the video channel becomes really important. And guess what? Guess how you push that video channel out? Email.
Yeah.
Invite people to watch the video. Invite people to a webinar. Invite people. You've got all these different ways of getting that content in a digestible form for business to business, where you could get your opt-in.
You could. And that's a great point. And you know why I opt into business emails? Like, I do it oftentimes because either and like, this is something that like me as a buyer of services and a buyer of software, like oftentimes I will, because I try to monitor my own behavior. And like, when do I feel compelled to opt into something with my business email address? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's either because it's something like MarTech, where like I want to know what trends are coming and I want to like get some insight and I want to see what people are talking about. What's the hot topic? Is it, whatever it is it AI or whatever? Like that's one scenario, right? And like that's one that I do like to see every day, is like, okay, what's the trending topics? The other, but that's thought leadership, right? The other is, I really want to buy this thing because I know it's going to transform my marketing and allow me to do stuff that I can't do right now. But I also know it's not in budget because of whatever. And so I'm going to continue to like stay in touch with it and see what they're doing and like try to, maintain a relationship, because eventually if I can find budget for it, I'm going to want to do that.
Also, so selling points.
Yeah, but it's often because something happened, and like, funny enough, it's usually like organic search, where I'm like, you know what, is there like a really good dynamic landing page generator out there? So, here I hop into my browser and I'm like, dynamic landing page builder that connects with Salesforce and Pardot, right? And it like pops up, right? And then I like maybe find a few and I pop around and I'm like, But now we're looking at other factors. Design. Does design of the site make me feel like this is a credible vendor? Mm-hmm. Email, like, are they telling me like, hey, we have email, and like, we'll pop ideas into your inbox and we'll like help you understand like how other people are using this. Like, just subscribe here, like demonstrate the value, make it easy for me to subscribe, literally put it top of fold so I know where to find it, because I'm probably looking at 5 other vendors, right? Do you have videos? Is it clear that like you align to what it is? So I mean, I think going back to like your point about email and like sort of how email marketers are like sometimes kind of siloed out from other marketing units. I mean, to me, to get somebody onto your email list is searchability, SEO, website credibility, right? Like, how's that design look? What is your social presence? Because I may have seen you on social, right? But like, oftentimes I am the worst attribution case, because like, I'll see your ad, but then I'll go pop your domain into my browser. So like, I broke your connection. And I know I'm doing it. I'm not doing it on purpose to be mean. I just know it's.
A lot of people do that. They just see an ad, but then they want to know about the company. So
yeah, or I'm a UTM stripper also. I'll strip a UTM if I want to share it with somebody. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm committing.
No, I didn't think that.
But it's all of these different factors, and like, that's what's getting me on your email list, And then of course you think about like what keeps me on your email list as you start to think about nurturing me through the funnel, because it's not going to be me clicking to buy on email that's going to close me, but it will be a factor in the relationship as I move further down the pipe. I think like what where you get back to on email metrics, and you have these conversations where people are like, oh, well, how good are your open rates, or how good are your click-through rates? And those vanity metrics is like, well, that doesn't take into account so many other factors, right? What does the design of your email look like? How many emails did I receive from you this week? Because if it was like 10, by the time I get the 10th one, I promise you, it could be the best content I've ever seen in my whole life. You could be sending me links to like the next greatest novel, and I'm like, I'm not going to click on it because I'm tired of seeing it, Is it not valuable? Or like, is your SDR team also emailing me in conjunction with your marketing in such a way that like is off-putting? And like, don't make me define like what off-putting is, but like sometimes I get really off-putting messages from sales. Like I think there was one for a while that was like, are you tied up in a basement? Like, is that why you're not returning my emails? And I'm like, this is very cringe. You know?
Please don't ask me that.
Yeah, I think like when you think about email metrics these days, there's just so many factors into like whether or not they're good that it's not enough to be able to like just look at clicks and opens and say this is good or this is bad.
What you just said, before, that's where the relationship between sales and marketing are literally working against each other. So sales is sending you their cold email, are you in a basement? That's why I haven't answered my email. And then you're getting this beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful email from the email side, designed perfectly with all these, calls to action. And you're like, you just put me in the basement, in handcuffs. And now you want me to buy your stuff? You're working against yourself. That's the definition of off-putting, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that that's something that like, I know my team works really hard to be sure that there's like a bridge there so that like things feel cohesive. And I think that you're right. Like that cohesive feel is really important. And like knowing like the left hand, knowing what the right hand is doing is so important in like successful B2B email strategy. Cause it's happening. So like take a proactive step and be sure that like what you're sending makes sense. Like the other thing is like, what if your SDR team is outbounding as part of their nurture cadence, the exact same content piece that you are outbounding in your email nurture? Then like, who's to say that like they didn't open it in your email nurture because they already got it from the SDR like that? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, I think email can't be viewed in a silo anymore. I mean, it can't be viewed as a standalone. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is that in some cases, odd cases, with companies, a model may also be, oddly, business to business and business to consumer. So that they may have a consumer email model going out for the same brand. For example, they sell they're selling something that they want to white label. So they're selling that on a sales level to other businesses. But they also sell that on their brand. So they're selling those to consumers. Don't treat your consumer like sales. Those messages don't match. So don't do I'm going to use the term, don't do a blast to everybody. If you don't know the difference between your consumer and your sales business, please email 101. And I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I think the number one reason that email campaigns fall flat is that whoever planned the strategy either didn't have time, didn't have authority, or didn't think about the experience of the recipient. And I think like in my experience, it's usually time or authority. Like a lot of times the email marketer knows and is like, this is not good, but like doesn't have the authority to push back. And that's like I think that's one problem. I think more rare is that they didn't think about the like how a recipient would feel. But I do think that happens too. Like there are instances where like nobody stopped to say like, hey, does that make sense? Or they're thinking about just this one email and they're not thinking about it in relation to what's happening on, sales cadences or what's happening in like, social or what's happening on the website. Like they're thinking about it in the silo of email. I mean, I think we're all cross-channel marketers at this point. Like we kind of have to be because that's how the buyer buys is cross-channel. And, it doesn't help anyone to think about any of this stuff in a vacuum. I mean, like a conversation that like we're having internally is like, how does SEO implicate, or how does it, I guess I should say impact. So how does SEO impact email content, and how does that impact advertising via, say, account-based marketing? And like, how are all three interrelated? and like trying to find the connection points between like what are people searching for, and is that a good anchor piece content, and is that something that should be incorporated in our email nurtures, and is that also something that account-based marketing can touch. But like those are all things that are like working together, right? And like, you know, how can you use all the data you have to make a decision instead of just looking at clicks and opens, which are flawed these days because of the data privacy landscape.
The other thing that I have been mulling over lately is that everybody in marketing, we think like marketing, and we've forgotten what it's like to be on the other side, who really, the people that get the emails that are not marketing at all. You know, we're just, again, let's not talk about consumers, but you're in a business, and I guess you know darn well you're getting sold to, right? So here's an example. When I do networking stuff and, you know, we're introduced to each other, right? It would seem obvious that you don't sell to each other. You get all of those facial expressions, body language, behaviors, slogans. You know them all. You're holding back your own. So when you try to sell to somebody who sells, you can't do that. You can't think like that. So it's very difficult to send those emails out to somebody who thinks like that, so that they could get it and say, this company really gets me, as opposed to this company's just selling to me. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So there's that part where the marketer takes themselves out of being in marketing and sales and the business end of it, and says, what does this company have to offer us? You know, I'm going to end up buying something. Am I going to end up buying a piece of whatever that my boss is going to say, or the company is going to say, why did we ever go with this service provider? Whose idea was that? You know, and then it's going to come back to me, or, you know, am I going to be able to say, well, they had all these, you know, they offered a great relationship. We've been literally able to do other things with this service company, not only the product that they have, but whatever the bells and whistles are with the product that comes. We have done those and all of these things, whereby management goes, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that customer service module that we also purchased from. You're right. And the same thing with the business to consumer, whereby we think, oh, where's the call to action? You think the person who's getting the emails going, where is that call to action? Going, oh, I can buy, bing. And they click on it. They're not thinking the way we think that call to action is. They're not thinking it really, this should be at the top, this should be at the bottom. We think that way, but it needs to be even more of a natural conversion. We need to get out of that manipulated mindset where, oh, if we do this because it worked X, Y, and Z times, it's certainly going to work for this group. It may or may not. I mean, what works for one doesn't work for the other, which is what I say to everybody who says, oh, can you give us a case study? I'm like, well, no, you can tell me about your business before I even go there, because your business is going to be different than an identical business because of your boss is, I don't know, 20 years younger than this boss. Your boss is, in South America. This one's in China. I mean, whatever, it's different. So I know that we think marketing, but we really need to think consumer. And the biggest thing that I say is, or the biggest thing that I hold that thought up with is the subject line, because we worry so much about the subject line, and the consumers, either business to business or business to consumer, they don't know what the subject line is. They haven't got a clue. I'm not saying it never works. I'm just saying I would love to see a study. I would love to see it, because I would say at least 65% of the time, no clue. No clue what the subject line was. They're looking for the brand. When the brand comes in, it's either time to open it or it's not. If they love your brand, they're going to save it. If you've got the critical information in the subject line, they're going to search and find it. That's where the subject line comes in handy. It's not that, I need to use it. I need to pack it with a verb to start with. I'm not saying that's not going to work. That is a call to action, and that does work. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm merely saying we overthink these things, and we don't think, what is the behavior of the consumer? Again, business to consumer. They're not buying a pool right now. It's not the season to buy a pool. It's summer. They've already got the pool. It's not the time of the year to buy a pool. But they're getting their emails from Intex, who sells pools, and they're keeping them because they're waiting to buy the pool come the end of winter, right? They're going to search for it. How are they going to find it? Maybe they started. Maybe it's starred and it'll easily be found, but otherwise it's going to be what's in the content when they search for it that they find it. So there your content marketing comes in handy. And it's a different concept of just, let's get them to open it. Let's get them to find it. So, I've gone off on a limb. I have this thing about, subject line conversations. They don't think like consumers or the person opening the email. And if I were to ask you right now, what were the last subject line you opened today from an email? Go ahead.
I've taken up embroidery, and there was one that was about embroidery kits. And let me see if I can remember what it was.
It was about embroidery kits. That's what I'm saying. There you go.
I did open it because of the subject line. Because I think it was like 10% off of, it was like an offer, and I was like, and it's one that. So here's my barometer of my personal inbox is like, when I get emails, either I am looking to save them, or I'm looking to delete them, or I'm looking to read them right now and then delete them.
That's right.
I would say I probably delete 98% of emails that I get.
I'd say that's pretty normal.
Yeah. And then I probably read 1%, and then I probably read 1.5%, and then I probably save 0.5%. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times if I save them, it's either because the content was really good and I don't know where else I would save it, where I would regularly see it. And I'm like, I want to come back to that. Like a good example would be like, the New Yorker will like send out short stories of people that I'm like, I love them. Like, and so I'll save that email because I'm like, I want to come back to that later and read that short story.
Where I've subscribed to get them. They're literary articles. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to save it. I don't know when I'm getting to it, but I'm going to
I would
the person's name and I'm rifle through his content to read through the content or her content. Yeah. No.
Right. Although I will sometimes give my email address in hopes I will get an offer if I'm in market to buy something, and then often feel frustrated when I'm not sent an offer.
Yeah. Again, that's like the salesperson going to sales about sales, or trying to sell a salesperson to buy something. It's like we look for that coupon because we know.
We know how to look for. We know how to game the system and be like, sure, I'll sign up for your email if you'll send me the offer.
In the shopping cart and see what happens.
Purposefully abandoned. You want my email address? Sure. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really work in B2B, right? Like that would never work. I couldn't, entice you to come back. I mean, I think that's something that like.
But you would get sales. You would get sales on the phone. So you might. I mean, it doesn't game it exactly the same. If you're ready to buy, you put in your cart and you leave it there. And if there's some mechanism online to buy the service and you leave it there, odds are you'll get a phone call from a salesperson and you're thinking, you're hoping, if they negotiate, maybe this will do it. And now you learn something. Now Pavlovian, science has come into play. Like, the next time I buy a SaaS product online, I'm going to leave it in the cart, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, software is closer, I think, to consumer than services. Services, like I can't put like I can't put like an audit or a consulting opportunity into the inbox.
Exactly.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I can't afford to buy your coaching services and leave them there. Although these things, they're commoditizing a lot of things. So,
it's true.
Everything becomes like a website where you could buy it online. So
that is the future. Yeah. Even for B2B, we'll find a way to work into that system. And it's because of the immediacy, right? People want the immediacy of qualification.
Mhm.
I think in consumer, it's pricing. I think in software, it's pricing. And I think in services, it's alignment of need first and then pricing second.
And
usually it's pricing.
and if it comes down to the bottom line, they'll find a way of getting a better bottom line. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
It's just a matter of time. So we've talked about every which way and loop with attribution and email marketing and business and sales and customer service. And customer service, I find, is the stepchild of every business. It's like, I'll just end this by asking you about this. I find that customer service has all of the content and nobody asks them any questions. They know all of the questions that are asked. They know every single thing that pisses every consumer off, every person off. They know everything and nobody listens to them.
That's so true. That's, I used to work in software, and that was often like the first place that I would go for new content or for, like blog post ideas or any of that, or for nurtures, is I would say, hey, customer service, like customer success, where's there a sticking point? What are people having issues with? And you're right. Like that, I totally agree. I think, again, it's definitely more software than it is services, but I think even in services, like having conversations with the support team, the people who are boots on the ground with customers day in, day out, and have that close relationship, a lot of times know really well what's going on and what people are talking about and what's bothering them. And that can lead to some great content, both for email and for web.
Somebody, if I go on to Verizon and I type in, because it might be time to buy a phone. Now they've got so many services, Lord only knows. Time to buy a phone. I may want to change my package. I may have a problem with the internet speed. I may have any amount of things going on. The first touch is chat.
Yeah.
Are they losing that with the chat bot? I don't know. And that's a whole other conversation.
Indeed.
You have that conversation with the chatbot, has no barometer, like, oh, this is happening again. This needs to be escalated.
Yeah.
Now, it may or may not. I really don't know. I'd love to find out. That's a question that I maybe I'll have with an AI geek. But yeah, I just find that there's a lot of content. It's not just storytelling, although storytelling is great. Not every brand needs to tell a darn story about how I went shopping and I tripped and fell and now I'm vulnerable and, oh, don't you feel bad for me and buy my product. It's like not everything works that way. And I think we're getting it's becoming a little bit much like those long stories that you get in an email, and it's like, okay, lay off the storytelling. The storytelling's in customer service. Stories that you want to tell about the customer that called and said da 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 da, and we solved the problem, and this is how we solved the problem, and now they love us to death. End of story. So, what kinds of things do you want to leave my little audience with today, Natalie?
Sure. I think the number one thing is, if you're in B2B and probably if you're in B2C as well, is go make friends with all the other channels, because every single channel that your team is using for marketing efforts is impacting your email, whether or not you realize it. So make sure it's working in tandem. And I think that's true for what the sales team is sending to. Make sure you're friends with them. And I think that's kind of the first step. I think the second step is, as you start to see such a huge impact on the validity of email marketing metrics, right? Like the stuff that we've kind of standardly used, clicks and opens, we know is being impacted by data privacy, by security bots, all kinds of things. Just remember that like email is a relationship tool. And like what you should be trying to measure is the impact on relationship. And like, yes, sometimes that correlates to sale, but sometimes it doesn't correlate directly to sale, in which case, like, that doesn't mean it's not valuable. It just means it was playing a different type of role. And I think like that's where you should be trying to take your analytics journey is like, yes, first off, did it drive a sale? That's important, right? But like, I think that can't be the only metric of success. It also has to be, where did it influence the relationship? Where did it, establish credibility with the brand? Where did it provide an important touch point when somebody needed an answer and couldn't find it? So, I mean, I think that's the direction email is going, is like looking across all of the channels and the impact there and thinking about how it's impacting the funnel, not just in terms of metrics, but in terms of like relationship value.
And that needs to be carefully strategized with some metric that can be something that can be measured. So a very strategic click.
Yeah.
Say, there's the relationship right there, because that was a click to something very specific that was in regard to a relationship builder,
Yeah.
or this, this was a click to a webinar, and it was a specific type of webinar whereby we can identify this type of behavior or this type of an interest. It's not, oh, let's just drive them to the webinar. What kind of webinar? Oh, it doesn't matter. Just any webinar at all.
Yeah.
You've got to strategically comb through your assets to determine all of those those specific attribution points, those metrics that you're literally making up as you go along the line.
Yeah.
This campaign is about this relationship building. So if this does well, if they click or open or whatever it is that they're going to do, we've proven that, this is a relationship builder. Now we're going to take them down we're going to bring them to another place through another journey. And this journey is going to be the part of the life cycle. Duh. You've got to strategize it out. It's not easy. But
No. Takes work. Yeah. But that's why it requires a real email person to do the work on email.
As complicated as some people would make it be. It doesn't need to branch out and drive yourself crazy and look like a spider's web. It doesn't need to look like that. It can be linear. It can. If you think it out and you strategize, perhaps you've got 5 different journeys. So now you segment, hopefully you've got your data points, because, a lot of these, the automation tools are great, but we tend to overcomplicate them by these really wild rides where if they do this, bring them all the way over here, then they rejoin over here, and then they go over here, and then they come down over here. And when it comes time to measure it, you have lost yourself because you're all over the place. They've moved from here, they jumped from there, they've rejoined over here. You don't know what they've done. The point has been lost. So segment, simplify, strategize, do all that stuff.
And then send, the final send.
And then rinse, wash, and, do it all over again. We've got to rinse again. It's dirty. It's not working anymore. Whatever. It doesn't ever end. It may be evergreen, but it's not ever evergreen. It just means tweak it a little bit. Feed it a little bit. It needs water. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for sitting with me. And where can people find you on the web? Tell us that.
Let's see. I think best place for hopefully soon will be Humans of Email podcast season 2. Jen and I are working on that. And we've got all the social channels for Humans of Email and your favorite podcast venue. And then, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a very open, welcoming person, I think, on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me. Same for Twitter, although I am there less often, and that's just Natalie T. Jackson on Twitter. And that's it. I mean, you can find me offline as well. I live in Kansas City. So if you're in Kansas City and you want to grab a coffee, let me know.
You've got it. I definitely will do that.
All right. Thanks for having me, Joy. It's been fun.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.